This is my John Deere chainsaw. I've had this thing since 1998 and it's done a really good job. Never broken down on me, and I've been through about 5 chains on it, cut a ton of wood. Wish I had one with a longer bar on it, but this one's done a pretty good job. I only use it about 3 times a year. And right now, to get that big tree done, I need to sharpen this blade. So I'm going to show you 3 different methods I use to sharpen my blades. The first method is to use a hand file. And this one takes some effort and some time, and it does an okay job, but you have to make sure that you keep the right angle. So you can see on here, you've got a 30-degree angle, and that's usually what the teeth are on a chain for a chainsaw. And as you file that, you need to make sure that you're keeping that angle at that 30 degrees. Sometimes that can be challenging. You have to put enough pressure on it to get a good edge on there, and it does take a little bit of work. So this one works okay if you're in the field and you just need a quick tune-up and get a little bit of an edge on there. But if you've got a pretty dull chain, this is probably going to take you a lot of work and a lot of time to get that thing right. The flat part just sits across the top here, and it rolls on this raker, and you just back and forth. I usually give it about 10 strokes or so. It'll refine a good edge on there. If you've already got a decent edge, it'll make that edge a little bit better. But if you've got a pretty dull chain, that's going to take a lot of effort. So that's one method I use, and I usually keep this in my chainsaw case when I'm out in the woods. Now this sharpener here just slides over the top of your chainsaw bar, and you've got this stop that is adjustable, and you just put it on there. And what I like to do is just put my carbide bit in the hole and then put it up against that first tooth, and then tighten down my 2 outside screws here to hold it at the right height on the bar. You can see where it holds the tooth, and gets right up behind that tooth, and then you can adjust that forward or backward based on that set screw. This is a whole lot easier than using a hand file. You get a consistent angle every time, and this jig just makes it super simple to get a consistent edge on all your teeth. Now when you sharpen your chainsaw, it's going to be important that after probably 2 or 3 sharpenings, you're going to want to lower your rakers a little bit. So these rakers, or otherwise called stops, this is what determines how big of a bite each of your teeth on your chain takes out of the wood. So as you sharpen each of your teeth, your angle, it's going to make that blade angle set further back and a little bit lower. So this raker is going to need to be reduced a little bit. You don't want to go too low on it, but one way to tell if it needs to be lower is you can put your flat file right on top of a couple of teeth, and you'll see that the rakers come right up to the bottom of the file, even with the teeth. So that tells me my rakers need to come down a little bit. Otherwise, they're going to take really, really small bites out of the wood, and it's not going to cut that well. So we're just going to take a simple file, hand file, and we're going to file those rakers down a little bit. You don't need to take a lot off. You just need to take it down a little bit at a time. And just using a hand file is, I think, the best way to do that. Just file it down and then put your file over the top again to see where the rakers line up under the file to see if they're low enough below the tooth. Now, the third method I use for sharpening chainsaw blades is with this electric sharpener. I got this, I believe, from Harbor Freight a couple years ago, and it does a pretty good job. So I just mounted this on a piece of wood that I'll just clamp onto my workbench, and that holds it pretty good. I didn't want to mount this directly to my workbench because I didn't want it in the way, but you do have to mount it to something, and you can't just put a clamp right on here because it gets in the way of this wheel, this grinding wheel traveling down and getting to the right depth. So that's why I mounted it on that piece of wood, just clamped it on my workbench, and this one works pretty good. So and it makes fast work, but you got to be careful because this can grind off a little bit too much. Essentially, you just put your chain in there. Get a little closer here. You put your chain in there, and then it has a stop that you just back that up to the back of your blade, and then you can use this tightening handle to tighten up that blade to keep the chain secure as you come down and grind just a little bit off the face of that tooth. This is adjustable, so if I need to adjust, if I just need to make sure that the edge of the tooth is just touching barely touching that grinding wheel, I can use this adjustment screw to move this back and forth. So it's really important that when you grind using this blade, just like the other sharpening methods, this is at a 30-degree angle. So this adjustment right here will change the angle of your tooth cut. And so you'll see there's a 30 degrees on this side. Then to grind the teeth going the other way, you just flip it over to the 30 degrees on this side. So right now we're grinding this way. So I'm just going to set that at 30 degrees and going to make sure the tooth is butting, just touching the edge of the wheel there. So I'm just going to turn that in a little bit, and you can tell, but you can just feel a little bit of a catch as you're bringing that grinding wheel down. That looks pretty good right there. So I'm just going to tighten that, check it one more time. That looks pretty good. So I'm just going to hit the on switch here and just going to give it just a quick touch there. And you can see how quick that process works. Just move it to the next one, and that should be set just about right. So you can go through a lot of teeth with this sharpener really quickly. Again, you don't want to grind too much off. You just want to just put a nice little edge on there without taking off too much material. Otherwise, you're going to go through your chains pretty quickly, taking too much material off. So this one works pretty well. It goes pretty quickly. The only thing I don't like about this is that it cuts a little bit more of a flat angle on the blade, where on the carbide, it has more of a cupped. Let me get this one out again. Or using this sharpener, it's really easy. You don't have to, you know that both of these are set to 30 degrees coming from each side. So that works pretty slick. But then the roundness of this carbide really does a better job of getting that cupped. Let me put that in here. This one does a better job of making more of a cupped angle on your cut, where this sharpener gets more of a flat cut. This one, when you have more of a cupped, rounded cut, it's going to dig more into that wood. So I really like this method the best in terms of the chainsaw blade performance. But this sharpener, the electric sharpener, does a really fast job, and it does an okay cut. It'll do the job for you, but you are going to go through chains probably a lot faster because this thing's going to take more material off if you're not really careful. So just to recap the three methods, the first one is just the hand file. This is a really good option just to put a nice little edge on your chain, on the teeth. But if you need to take a lot of material off, this one is going to take a lot of work. This one here is a really easy one. Just mounting that on your chainsaw bar and using this wheel to turn and grind the face of that tooth. It does make a nice concave cut in the blade, and that does a really good job of cutting through the wood. And then finally, the electric sharpener, which makes really quick work out of sharpening a chainsaw blade, but it does put more of a flat surface on your blade, not a nice cupped cut, but it does make the process go really fast, and you can grind a lot of material off your chain really quickly if you're not careful and if you don't have that stop adjusted just right. So we've done the sharpening on this chainsaw, and it is ready to go tackle that tree. So that's the next step in our process. Go see how it cuts. All right, we are ready to start cutting this tree. And if you pan over here and you see how it's all kind of caught up in the trees, it's in kind of a precarious position. So there's a lot of things that as I start cutting, things will start to fall down. So I got to be really careful. And I'm going to start cutting this one right here. And I just got to be ready to jump out of the way so that it doesn't come down and I get trapped underneath this log. So first thing is make sure you got your eye protection on, your ear protection. We're going to go ahead and start it and give it a cut and see how well this chain cuts now. I think that did a pretty good job, did pretty good work, and you can kind of hear the chain, the motor was, the power head was bogging down a little bit. That chain was trying to grab a lot of material, but I like the size of the wood shavings, the wood chips coming out of that thing. If you like this kind of video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you can get more of this kind of content. Thanks for tuning in.